And hello, everyone. My name is Obioha, and I'm here with Ainjel McDonald from Rare Bird Money. And some of you may have seen me before last year as we did a series in 2022. And so today we're going to be chatting a bit about generational wealth. As a kind of reminder, our this will be interactive. So we're not just going to be talking at you. We want to hear from you. And with that, I'll go ahead and provide a bit of an intro about myself. So again, my name is Obioha Okere. I go by Obi, and I've grown up in Seattle, been in Seattle all my life. And I started my kind of like financial journey in high school. That's when I got my first job working part-time at Big Five Sporting Goods. And shortly thereafter, I made my first investment. And then in 2020, I launched my platform, College Money Habits, which seeks to inform people about financial literacy and teach them about different topics such as budgeting and investing. And then some fun facts. I've got a twin brother, and I like to try new restaurants. And whenever I travel outside of Washington State, I make a point to never go to restaurants that we have here in Washington State. And my motto for the year has been, just get started. So when it comes to various things such as investing or different goals that I've set that I've been hesitant to start, this year I've just been adamant about just getting started and just chasing after them however I can. And hopefully you all can see my screen. Perfect. So now I'm gonna pass it to Ainjel.
Hi, thanks, Obi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ainjel McDonald. I am based out of Houston, but I am a first-generation American, born and raised in New Jersey. My family is Jamaican. I actually started my financial independence journey while working as a server at Cheesecake Factory. Years prior to that, I had gotten kicked out of college. And so on my path to get back to college, I joined the Air National Guard. But I wanted to avoid student debt by all possible means. And so that's why I joined the military and really started saving my money while I was a server. So that was very little, but it was the beginning. I love to travel. My husband and I, we like to take trips on a budget. That's kind of our thing. And now we have an almost 2-year-old. And so now it's like an activity traveling with a toddler. So that's been fun. And my motto for this year is action over motion, and just making sure you're putting action alongside of education and the things that you want as well. And so what we wanted folks to think about while we're presenting this and talking about this is throughout the whole time here today, just think about what passing down generational wealth looks like to you. To me, it really just, in simplest terms, it's just making my child give her ease financially so that when she is starting on her own, she is not struggling, or she doesn't struggle in similar ways that I did, so that she has a little more freedom to do certain things that she wants to do. And so in layman's terms, that's it for me. Passing down generational wealth is that she has more freedom of her time and of herself.
Well said. And for myself, generational wealth is a combination of not only passing down assets, whether it's investments or savings, but also knowledge to ensure that those financial assets last for generations to come, and that those after me know how to manage their finances as well. But as Ainjel said, through this presentation, we want you to be thinking about what generational wealth looks like to you. And by the time that you leave, have a good idea of different ways that you can go about building generational wealth.
All right, so before we get into really building generational wealth, we also want to talk about just the history of building generational wealth in America, and specifically for women. So these are a few policy acts that I believe, and Obi and I believe, are really pertinent to understanding how in America women have had barriers to build generational wealth. But then also what the country has done and what policies have changed so that we can build more generational wealth. So going back to the Homestead Act of 1862, it provided about 160 acres of land, federal lands, to those who wanted to farm. And so at the time, they were trying to expand into the West. And so they essentially were giving people land. Um, and now with this, about 1.6 million white families were able to use this act and receive land essentially for free. But because slavery wasn't abolished until 1865, Black Americans did not have access to this until slavery was abolished. And so with that, about 6,000 Black families were able to use this and farm as well. And so that's one of the huge things about generational wealth, is passing down assets, as Obi had mentioned. And so with this, that was kind of just an early, easy way for people to gain wealth in that capacity. Then the first self-made millionaire woman was a Black woman, Madam C.J. Walker, and she did that through entrepreneurship. She had her own hair care line business. And so she was, from over all races, the first self-made millionaire woman. And that was by 1917. Then we have the 19th Amendment in 1920, where women were allowed to vote. However, that was mostly at the time white women, and a lot of times married white women, because other races and other ethnicities were not considered full citizens. They did not have equal access to voting as did others. But in 1920, that was when women were allowed to vote. The Equal Pay Act of 1963, it protected against wage discrimination based on sex. And so by law, required men and women in the workplace to get equal pay of work. And it didn't have to be for the exact same job, but it had to be for a relatively similar work. One thing to really, and I'll get into that, but the Equal Credit Opportunity, really powerful, and a lot of women and people in general don't know this. But what it did essentially was it prohibited creditors. So you're thinking about getting credit cards, banks, you're going for mortgages. They could not discriminate against credit applicants' race, color, religion, nationality, sex, marital status, or age, but also because an applicant received income from a public assistance program. Before, there was discrimination if you did receive assistance, and this one blocked that. But then also, in addition to this one, before 1974, a woman could not take out a mortgage or sign for a mortgage or credit card without getting a co-signer from either her husband or from her father. So essentially, until 1974, women weren't even allowed to have or build their own type of credit or ownership of land without having a male or a man co-sign that. Then in 1993, we have the Family and Medical Leave Act, which is FMLA, most people know it as, and allowed workers to take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to bond with a newborn or newly adopted or newly placed child, care for an ill child, spouse, or parent, or care for someone close to them that has a serious health condition. And this impacted women first and foremost because of maternity leave, but then also taking care of those that that are in their family. And a lot of times women are the ones that are the caretakers for their family, not saying that it's only time, but traditionally that's how it was in America, while with working women as well. And so this protected their jobs and allowed them to go back to work and not have to sacrifice their income while returning to work.
You to think about challenges to building generational wealth. One of the biggest ones is financial literacy. And so I am interested in the chat if some of you can indicate, or really all of you could indicate, whether or not your parents or guardians spoke to you about money when you were growing up. And also if you speak to kind of your family or friends about money as well, because I don't know how many of you were taught about financial literacy or investing or budgeting while in school, I know that for myself, I had one class that was on it, and I didn't learn much from that. But when it comes to generational wealth, it all boils down to an understanding of all these various financial topics. Because even if you were to, let's say, pass down $1 million to your children, or whether it's your grandchildren, if they don't have an understanding of how to budget or how to properly invest and how to save money and manage credit, that money is going to disappear, and it's no longer going to be generational wealth. It'll just be money that came and went. And so that is a big challenge when it comes to financial literacy. In addition, wages and income. And I think that's self-explanatory. Somebody who makes $20,000 a year is likely going to have more difficulty than somebody who's making $100,000 a year. But even then, it all will still boil down to financial literacy, because you can make an infinite amount of money every year, but if you're spending all of it, nothing's going to remain. And then lastly, with network, some of you maybe have heard the phrase, your net worth is your network. I know that in my personal situation, and I won't speak for Ainjel, my job that I have right now in consulting, which has helped me go about saving and go about investing, I got through networking, through people that I knew. And then I recently also got the opportunity to invest in the company that I work for. And that was, again, through people that I knew as well. And that's putting me in a position where I'll be able to continue building up my assets.
One thing that I think that people really need to understand, this is one thing that I learned myself, is that you don't need to be a millionaire to pass down generational wealth. Growing up, right, and as Obi had said, just even about financial literacy, for me, it was just my mother telling me how to save, and that was just it. Just save, 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 but not really giving me any reason to save or what that can do for me. And so I grew up with the belief that only wealthy people could pass down more wealth, right? And so I knew I wasn't wealthy, and so that was just one thing for me. But it is not a requirement to actually be a millionaire to pass down generational wealth, especially when you already have what generational wealth, what that definition means for you.
And to add onto this, I know that I was talking to Ainjel yesterday, and I mentioned that I know that today, if I were to vanish from the face of the earth, that my assets, the way that I've set it up, at least right now, is that my investments would go to my siblings. So I have an older sister and then a twin brother. And that in and of itself is a way of just kind of passing assets onto other folks, which I know would make their lives easier, as opposed to if I instead had nothing, or if I had debt that I was passing on to them. But it doesn't need to be, as Ainjel said, millions of dollars. It could be $100, could be $1,000, could be $10,000. It's just this idea of passing down something. And I know that one of you at least mentioned it in the chat, just something that you can do to make somebody in your family's life easier. So whether that's knowledge, or whether that's assets, anything works. So when it comes down to building generational wealth today, so the number one thing to do is to believe in yourself. I think it's easy when it comes to setting goals and the big picture to say, oh, I don't see myself achieving that, or I don't think that's possible. But if you're able to visualize success, or be realistic when it comes to your goals. So for instance, we'll talk about this later, but around setting specific and realistic goals. But it all starts with you kind of picturing this vision of success, and then increasing and diversifying income is paramount to building generational wealth. So I'm sure all of you have heard about investing, heard about real estate, starting your own business. We're not going to tell you that you need to do all those things, but a combination of different revenue streams where you're making money from, let's say, a 9-to-5 job, and maybe you have your own business and you're investing, all of those things are going to accelerate the process of building wealth over time. And then
to add to that really quickly, Obi, a lot of people don't think about this, but this is really where I started with building wealth. And also, when the first thing I did to increase my stream of income was get a high yield savings account. And people don't think, because it's not like a lot of money and because maybe it's not being paid out to you, but you do get it. That interest on a high yield savings account is literally an additional stream of income, because it's not income from like your direct labor. So if you're getting interest on that, even if it starts at like $10 a month or even like $5 a month, that literally just that is an additional stream of income. So you would then have two streams of income. And that is then leading into the habit of building generational wealth.
Thank you, Angel. And with starting small, so looked at some of the survey responses and was able to see some of the goals that you all have for the next 2 months and just for life in general. And one thing that I can remember doing back when I was in high school was setting goals. And I still have a sheet of paper where I had a goal of saving my first $1,000. And for the longest time, I used to write down all my financial goals, and then I'd write down like how much money I had, how much I was making, how much I was spending, so I could see how long it would take me to achieve those goals. But by starting out small, I was able to slowly watch as things increase. So it's like save $100 and then save 1,000 and then 10,000 and then 100,000. And so just making sure that even if your end goal is to save, let's say $10,000, you can set up smaller benchmarks that will help keep you motivated and that are maybe easier to attain. And all of that, I know that with goal setting and then achieving goals, another thing to add is to make sure to reward yourself. So whenever you hit a goal, whether it's going out to dinner or taking a vacation or buying yourself something nice, I would always make sure to reward yourself for that as well.
Yeah, so setting goals absolutely was, and again, I really remember the times of when I started, because I was a server, so that was my only income at the time. And so if any of you have ever been a server, right, you get cash. And so it's not, and it fluctuates the amount that you're going to get. So for me, it really was like, at the time I wanted to pay off some student debt from a school that I didn't graduate from. I went back to school, but that school still had to pay that one off. So I had to pay off student debt. And then I was living on my own, but I also wanted to save an emergency fund. So I actually did start with $1,000. And so with that, I just did 20% of every time I got paid, but to that goal. So I think with me looking at, I want $1,000. I looked at a time frame of when I wanted $1,000. So if it was like 6 months, then I calculated, okay, how much will I need over the 6 months each week or each month to get to $1,000, right? And so having that number and then actually making like milestones or making steps to get to that number, that's where it was easier than just thinking I want to save money, right? Because I can always just save money, invest money, but what is the goal for? And that goal was to have an emergency fund, because I didn't have one at the time. I had no like cash savings. And so because I believe I started off with just 1,000, if anything ever happened, I know I would at least have that. So this is one of the things that I think for people, when you're thinking about like setting goals, you want to make sure they're smart goals. And so they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Meaning specific, it has to be a specific one that you can point to. So saving $1,000, that's quickly specific. Measurable, right? That $1,000 is measurable because I know it's there. And then I can also put it against time, which is the time bound part. Is it achievable for me? At the time it was. With working, I knew that if I maybe worked more, worked longer, or if I saved more, it was achievable in the time that I had. And was it relevant to me, right? Was that $1,000 actually relevant for what I wanted to do? It was, because I simply wanted a emergency fund. And then time bound was I put a timing on it. And this is helpful because seeing time or having a time bound goal will allow you to reframe your mind around the time. But then say you don't make that, you can then extend it. But at least you're trying to hit a goal. And then Obi is always talking, we have similar goals this year, but about taking action and just doing it. So if you have this goal and you yourself already setting your measurable, achievable steps for this goal, it only just takes that first step and to keep going consistency with it.
And I want to pause here and see if there's any questions or if there's anything that Angel or I could clarify for any of you at this time. And it could be about anything, not necessarily something that we've mentioned thus far.
Hi, good morning. My question is, given the current state of the world in regards to investing and building generational wealth and ways to kind of have money to make more money, I'd love to hear more throughout your conversation about ideas on different things besides like savings. So investments, like should you invest in gold? Should you invest in land? Should you invest in, some of those things that you guys might be thinking of in regards to building generational wealth and investing? I'd really like to hear that. And then kind of get a take on what you guys think about the US dollar and how strong it is. If you have any ideas around that, that would be something I'd be interested in hearing about.
So I guess in relation to, and I want to partially answer that question, in relation to what Angel mentioned around taking action and just getting started, one thing for me is that, to be honest, I didn't have a savings account for most of my life. I opened a high yield savings account in 2020. So 3 years ago, but up to that point, I didn't have a savings account, and I was holding all of my money in a checking account. And for me, visually seeing like higher amounts of money that was easily accessible to me resulted in me spending a lot more. And by opening that high yield savings account, and then now I regularly set aside money every month, it's allowed me to build up a significant amount of savings now to where I'm thinking about purchasing a home, which is something that ultimately would help as far as building generational wealth. And it's also helped to create a strong sense of security for me. So I know that Margot mentioned kind of the state of the economy. One thing that I did as a result of kind of things being very confusing and in flux and the stock market kind of taking a dive is I focus more on saving money so that if my investments were to take a significant hit, I would still have assets that I could use to pay for anything that I needed and cover any business expenses that I had. And then I now recently have increased the amount that I'm allocating towards investments to start building that back up. And I want to, just pause, see if Angel, if you have anything to add. I do see another question.
No, I see Lenore has a question. So we'll get to Lenore quickly. But to answer your question, Margot, so one, with the state of the economy, as an investor, and I'm a long-term investor, this is actually a pretty great time to invest because this is the time of buy low and then sell high, right? This is that buy low period. And so while for me, because I have reserves, because I'm saving, inflation affects everyone, but because I already have my practices in place to invest and have savings, I'm not too concerned with the fluctuations of the market because I anticipate the market to go up and down over history, right? If you look at it, historically, the market does go up, but there always fluctuation in how it moves, right? It doesn't continuously linearly increase over time. That's true. But if you look at it, snapshots in history, there is going to be dips. And so we are part of, we're in the flow right now of typical how markets move. When it relates to the dollar, I'm going to be completely frank, I was an economics major, but to be truly frank, unless you're like involved in big policy or if you're doing like Forex trading, it really does not affect the regular person outside of inflation, your cost of goods, and if you're doing business internationally. Truly, it's really the cost of goods that's going to affect you more than anything else. But these are the kind of things in news that I feel like are like distractions for the regular person, right? It's really, those are like doing business with other economies. And then once we see the effects that come and happen to us, like how much is going to cost to buy certain groceries, how much is going to cost to buy goods, that's when we're really going to see if that matters to us. But I don't have any ownership, or I don't have any say in like policy right now on that big of scale. So I kind of stay in my lane, and mind the business that pays me when it comes to that. I pay attention to the news, but I don't let it distract me to worry me for those kind of things. And then move on to Lenora, I believe.
I guess in the meantime, there was a question in the chat from Aaron Anderson about easiest avenues to use for creating cash flow without using actual cash. For example, like using credit as a tool. So Ainjel, I don't know if you have any immediate thoughts around that, but I know for myself, trying to think of, I think most of the different streams of income that I have right now were a result of small investments, whether it's investing in the stock market or my high yield savings account, and then I also have some real estate investments. I'd say that when it comes to credit, I know that real estate is one thing that you can do if you have strong credit to help build cash flow. It does take a decent amount of effort, and it still will require capital, but there are different programs that can be utilized, and that is something that comes up later in this deck as a way to build generational wealth. And I know that both Ainjel and I, we have our own businesses where we talk to folks about financial literacy and also provide coaching. And that is something that I know that I started with, I think it was like $140. So I didn't use credit. I could have to help build my website. And then now that's turned into a significant revenue stream for myself. But to your question, Aaron, the first thing that comes to mind is real estate. However, it's not the easiest thing to do as far as becoming a real estate investor. And Ainjel, any thoughts on that?
No, I think you answered that pretty well. I would say as well, like using credit as a tool for me, and I know we're going to discuss this later on, but buying property and using credit to buy property, that's how I've used credit without using cash. Now, even with getting a home, you'll need some cash, but there are ways to use lower amounts of cash and then use majority credit to do that. And similar to Obi, when building my business, I saved up to invest into my business without using credit for it. Now, that's not to say that I don't have plans of eventually using business credit for it, but to start, I started low for the investment to then see where I could go rather than get credit immediately, because I didn't want to get into the possibility of like getting business credit and then not knowing my numbers and not knowing how to really turn that over into a true revenue stream for myself.
And I noticed a few comments and questions related to investing. We're going to touch on it in this presentation, but we also do have, there's an upcoming presentation on investing for beginners. And there's also a mini course that'll be available to all of you that's currently in development. That'll also be on investing for beginners as well. So there's a lot of upcoming content related to investing. And so for right now, we're going to pause on questions, and we have an exercise for all of you related to goal setting, where we want you to start off by thinking of a short-term or long-term goal that you have. So short-term being something that you'd like to achieve in the next 6 months. It could be something that I guess you want to achieve maybe by the end of the year, close to the end of the year, or it could even be something that you want to achieve by June or July, as opposed to a long-term goal, which would be something that you want to achieve in the next year plus. But I want you to start to think of a goal. And if you have paper and pencil accessible, to write down that goal. Otherwise, if you've got Word on your computer or tablet, to use that as a way to take a note. And then we want you to make it a SMART goal. And so we're going to take 10 minutes to do this. An example of taking a goal and making it a SMART goal would be, let's say that you have a goal of saving more money. One way of making that specific would be by saying, like, I want to save X amount by this date. So for instance, you might say, I want to have $5,000 in my savings account by the end of the year. And then your next step would be to, and not expecting you to do this in 10 minutes, but the next step would be to evaluate your income and your expenses to see if you can save enough towards that goal for it to be something that is achievable. But for right now, for the next, let's say 5 minutes, I want you all to think of and write down either a short-term or long-term goal that you have and work on making it a specific, measurable goal. And in addition to thinking about goals, or rather a goal that you have, also consider things that might prevent you from achieving that goal. So things that could occur that would be blockers to that, and also thinking about things that you might need to sacrifice in order to achieve that goal. Because I know in the past, when I had a significant savings goal, I had to sacrifice going out to eat, which is something that I love to do. But for a certain period of time, I just couldn't do that in order to hit my goal. But it ultimately put me in a position where I could afford to go out to eat and try new restaurants when I wanted to. So think about things that you might need to sacrifice for a certain period of time as well. Cameron mentioned a goal to pay off debt and start a crash pad in the next 2 years. Awesome goal. With that, or sorry, Angel, were you about to add something?
Oh, no. So, I mean, just with that, so yes, awesome goal, but being a SMART goal, it would say, okay, if you have this amount of debt, you want to pay off this amount, right? So even when I was paying off student loans, I had literally looked at like how much the interest was, how much interest I didn't want to pay additionally, monthly, what I was going to put towards that, right? So you always want to do the minimum, but then additional, right? Not only the minimum, but absolutely at least. And then when you're paying off debt, I would advise either looking into the snowfall method or the avalanche method. And they're different as the snowball method, you're going to pay off the lowest amount first and then continue with that. Well, you paid the minimum for all of them, but to pay off the smallest amount first completely, and then continue paying on to the others. So you're essentially seeing it snowball effect. Avalanche, which is the method I used because I had the belief I didn't want to pay money for my money. So I paid off minimum for all of them, but I actually went to the one with the highest interest and then I paid it off. So when you're thinking about, I want to pay off debt, write that number down and then also continue to say, okay, I'm going to pay off this amount each time. Or if I ever have a little extra in my income for that month, I'm going to add it to that debt. And that will make it a truly like SMART goal. And then with the crash pad, look at the amount of what homes are now, or if you're looking to rent. And then also I would suggest putting in that number of how much things cost to furnish that crash pad. So you're in a position where you can say, okay, I need this X amount and I can get it this time, right? So the thing about the SMART goals is that you essentially are building steps within them, within that one sentence, not just a generic goal.
Awesome. Anybody else want to share? And we'll be taking a break here very shortly.
So Aaron had said to finish his course to expand her understanding of money management, and then long-term purchase a home by next year. That is awesome.
And I just want to add, because I have a similar goal. I guess Aaron and Margot, since both mentioned real estate, a goal of mine for, it's been like 2 years now, has been to purchase property. But I couldn't figure out kind of like how much I needed and how much I wanted set aside in order to do so. But I recently kind of settled on a number where I knew that like with that number, I could do a down payment and furnish the home, and then also have enough money set aside to maintain the lifestyle that I know that I enjoy. And so, Margo, I think you mentioned that you have it figured out. Aaron, as it comes to setting a particular goal, especially around real estate, I would think about how much you'd like to put as a down payment and what you'd want in emergency savings to ensure that if a sudden emergency occurred, that you could continue to pay for your mortgage and different expenses related to owning a home, and also just life, like groceries and things like that. All right, so now Ainjel and I are going to talk about what specifically we're doing and what we've been doing in our personal lives to go about building generational wealth. And I'm going to kick it off to you, Ainjel.
Okay. Thanks, Obi. So part of my journey for building generational wealth really starts with my want, and I was just talking to Obi about this, to be work optional. So to be financially independent and to be financially free, that is really the backbone of my platform, is for millennials to be financially free, right? And so essentially what that would mean is that I would no longer need to work to sustain my lifestyle. And so that journey has started for me. There is a specific number for me and my husband, and we are about a quarter way there. We're looking to retire or be financially independent, work optional, by 2035, 2034, 2035, for us. And so how that really started was should say, before it really started with us paying off debt, that was our first thing. I was about $20,000 in student debt. And an additional $20,000 from my mother having student debt for me. And my husband, who's my boyfriend at the time, he also had student debt. And so when we were going through, hey, building generational wealth, which we didn't really know at the time, we really took it upon ourselves to pay off that debt. And so we remember literally only buying safe things on sale. Obi had mentioned how he would limit himself from eating out. We would have like kind of games with each other where we couldn't spend more than $25 out on any outside food, but that included like drinks. So like we couldn't go get like a drink from the store, and it couldn't exceed $25 because that was our limit for ourselves. And so we essentially would write down every single time we purchased something. So it became a game for us. All of our furniture in our first apartment, every single piece was from the thrift store or Goodwill. And so when we had guests over, we would just ask them to bring books because we wanted to educate ourselves. So these were the things that like we started building habits for that. And so that was part of like the delayed gratification, eating out. We didn't do that at all. Picking up things to eat. We increased and prioritized our income. Moving to Texas is one of the ways that we also did that, because Texas does not have state income tax. And so we moved from Jersey, and Jersey has a high cost of living pretty much. And so we wanted to go somewhere that had a low cost of living. So I had the opportunity to move for my job. And so we did that, and then also increased our income. So we switched jobs. And in this market for our fields, that wouldn't be as like easily obtainable as I would say as it was when we did that. But at the time we were able to switch jobs and increase our income. We automated our savings. So we would automatically put percentage of our paycheck into savings. I just remember I started off with 10% and then I moved up to 20%. And right now we are at about 50%. So we pretty much live off of my income and save my husband's income. And we've been doing that for the past 2 years. And that's part of our journey as well. And for the saving that income, we actually invest that. So the investments we use, we have Roth IRAs, we have our 401ks, which we invest into. Our companies offer those, and so we do those. And then we also have brokerage funds that we invest into ETFs. And I had mentioned it in the chat, low fee index funds and using ETFs. Because I am not someone who likes to really pick and choose stocks. I have a few stocks that I picked and choose, but I like to follow ETFs, follow the market, really the S&P 500. Sometimes growth markets I will do, so like technology and things like that. Budget, that was huge for us, but the saving is into that budget. And real estate, we do own our home. We bought our home 4 years ago. I'm a vet, and so I utilize the VA loan. That was pretty important to me. I believe that we should use all sorts of like federal funding that we can. And so I use the VA loan. We do have another property, which my parents live in. So it's not cash flow for us. But for me, that's part of my generational wealth also. It's maybe not lower generation, but it's above, because I wanted my parents to have the freedom to not have to worry about increasing rent because they didn't own their home. So for me, that was part of me doing generational or giving them generational wealth, so that they weren't concerned with, and my father's retired and my mom is too, that they weren't concerned with, having to purchase a home or having to rent and possibly being at the will of people increasing rent on them.
Awesome. Thank you, Angel. And for myself, as far as my journey when it comes to building generational wealth, I would highlight those first 3 things on the slide as far as prioritizing income, delaying gratification, and automating savings. So for me, my journey, as I mentioned before, started around high school, where one thing that I can remember is my dad growing up, he would say, like, there's no generational wealth and there's no wealth in our family. If you want to be rich and you want to create generational wealth, you're gonna have to do that on your own. So one thing that he would do is he just mentioned real estate as a way to go about that. And while I don't own real estate present day, the first thing I did was to start investing. And my first investment was $150, and it was in what you'd call an index fund, which, without getting too deep into what that is, it's a way of buying like hundreds or thousands of stocks at one time. So investing in hundreds of thousands of companies at one time. And then my very next investment was in Starbucks. And so I'm sure many of you have heard of Starbucks or have been to a Starbucks. But I started off really by investing in companies that I knew, because the investment that I made after that was a company where the CEO's son went to my high school. And so I was somewhat familiar with the company, not like their financials and all that stuff, but I knew the name. And so that was my next investment. And I haven't stopped investing since then. So that was when I was 18. I am 26 right now. But if nothing else, investing has played a very significant role, if not the most important role, on my ability to grow my money over time, because that investment of $150 through kind of like regular contributions and things like that has grown to well over $100,000 now. And it's a great source of, it's a large portion of what I have today. And I know that there was questions earlier on like how we go about investing and things like that. I'll mention again that there is a later session on investing, but one thing that I would encourage all of you to do research on, especially when it comes to building passive income, are dividends. And dividends are, it's the simplest way, it's a company's way of paying back earnings to investors. So like pardon?
They're like kickbacks.
Exactly. And so an example would be Microsoft. So if you were to open a brokerage account, and you were to purchase a share of Microsoft, you are going to receive an amount, whether it's like 10 cents or 20 cents for every share that you own. And there's a tax implication of it. But through investing, I've been able to not only see growth in my investments from the value of those investments increasing, but I've also received dividend income, where as the amount of ownership has grown, so has the dividends that I receive. And so when it comes to building wealth, I'm earning income from my job in consulting. I'm also earning money from my business, College Money Habits. I'm increasing my money through investments, and then I'm also earning money from dividends, and then I'm also earning a fixed amount, so to speak, every month from my high yield savings account, which the very first month that I had my savings account, I earned $7. And last month I earned, it was $164. And so high yield savings, if you don't have it already, highly encourage them. And then investing, those are different things that I've done. And then with delayed gratification, so what that is, I've seen some different comments related to spending, especially around shopping. So my vices in my life are spending on food and spending on clothing. So I've mentioned that I have a twin brother. Both of us, we really like fashion and buying sneakers and buying clothing. And we go about it in different ways, but I have done the best that I can to make sure that I'm not buying everything that I want when it comes to clothing and when it comes to jewelry. And by starting that while I was much younger, so while I was in high school, and being careful to do that throughout college as well, and instead saving and investing that money, has now put me at a place where now I can afford to do those things, and it fits within my budget. And then lastly, with automating my savings, every month I have a fixed amount that comes directly out of my checking account, and it amounts to roughly 52% of my income is automatically transferred to a savings account. And that, in doing that, I'm limiting the amount of money that I can spend. And that has helped me budget around saving instead of budgeting around my spending. And to clarify, because both Ainjel and I have mentioned high yield savings accounts, the difference between a high yield savings account and a regular savings account is that a high yield savings account, they're typically online only. So they're not always going to have a bank branch that you can go into, like a Wells Fargo or Chase. And you are going to earn higher rates of interest. So for instance, a regular savings account, I think on average is around 0.3%. With a high yield savings account, it'll be 3%. And so it can be up to 20 times more. And as a result of that, you are going to earn an infinitely larger sum of money. So with a regular savings account, you might see like a cent every year, or like a few cents every year. With a high yield savings account, you're going to be earning dollars or hundreds of dollars every year, depending on the amount of money that you have in your account.
Yeah. And so just to piggyback off of that, because someone had asked about the high yield savings account as well, but with recent news, and maybe if some of you were following what Margot was saying, definitely want to reiterate that FDIC insured bank accounts, even those that are online, they do hold your money up to, and they insure your money up to $250,000 in that bank, right? And so again, this is where a lot of times, like news with financial literacy, with personal finance, it'll be a lot of noise. People are thinking that they're going to be bank runs, that these banks are going to fail. It is true, banks may fail. However, that particular bank, it was for a specific reason, and it was not typical consumers that had their money in those banks. A lot of that bank was heavily funded by startup investments or startup cash, and they had a lot of startup in there. So only like 5% of their account holders only had like $250,000 in them. Most of their account holders had much more money because they were businesses, and it just so happened that that bank, they would allow certain accounts that other typical traditional banks would not maybe fund. So if anyone's like hearing a lot of noise, like, this might not be the time to hold your money in the bank. I personally, while this is not advice, I don't believe that is good education for folks. Majority of us can hold our money in banks safely, and also online banks, not just brick and mortar banks. Those online banks, as long as they are FDIC insured, they will insure your cash funds up to $250,000 in each bank.
And slightly in answer to your question, Aaron, there's always going to be an element of risk when you're investing in the stock market. When you're saving money in a savings account, that level of risk is going to come close to near zero. But an important consideration is the impact of inflation. So Ainjel mentioned inflation earlier, and I'm sure many of you have gone grocery shopping before and have noticed that the value of your dollar has changed. And I know one common example that I use is just McDonald's, because I used to be able to, this is not grocery shopping, but I used to be able to go to McDonald's with $2.50 and get a McChicken and get fries. And now I can't do that. And that's an impact of inflation, where over time, and I believe on average, it's around 3%, the value of the dollar is just going to decrease over time. With investing, it's one way for your money to outpace inflation, to grow at a rate that's greater than inflation. And we've touched on investing a little bit, just to provide an example of kind of like what it means to invest in ownership of a company. Some of you have been likely to Costco before, or been to a grocery store before, and at a grocery store, you have the ability to go around and pick different products and purchase those products. And it is a marketplace. The stock market is a marketplace where you can purchase ownership of different companies. So it's a place where you could buy partial ownership of companies like Coca-Cola, Boeing, Microsoft. And then as those companies perform well, the value of your investments would increase. If they don't perform well, or perceptions of those companies aren't great, then the value of your investments would decrease. And that is at its core kind of the simplest way, one of the simplest ways of describing investing. But there is a later session on what it means to invest and how to go about investing. Ainjel, anything to add here?
No, I think that we talked about planting a seed, so starting small, right? And so I know maybe we should like taking it back a bit, right? And just simply saying investing. So there are so many several ways to invest, and ownership of a business is one. And we talked about, the marketplace, and so the stock market. But the things of that you want to do, that you can do yourself, is definitely utilize your employer sponsor plans, which is like a 401k or a 403b. They will have those. And what happens is they can ask, and you can call benefit centers, maybe chat with them, email them to see, if you don't already do this, how you can do that. And so it'll just take a portion of your paycheck out each paycheck, and it'll go directly into investing. And then you can choose those investments as well. And you just have to ask someone, because they're different, right? Each company will have a relationship with a different bank, a different brokerage. And so you'll have access to other investments. I may not know at all your company's policy, you may not know mine. And so that's one thing that you would have to do yourself, that you can't really like Google, where you have to talk to them directly to see, hey, how do I sign up for this? How do I access this? But then also, how do I choose my investments? And they should give you that information for free. Others as well, when you're looking at investing, things like brokerage accounts, right now, I would say as an early investor, or even if you do invest right now, I would implore you to use the bigger name ones, because they have been in business for a long time and they are relatively safe, right? And I only say safe because everything comes with risk. And so things like Vanguard, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, TD Bank America, those are the kind of brokerages that you want to see and research. Even Ally Bank also is a pretty good one. when you're looking to invest, if you don't already invest. Okay, so before we did not mention it, but part of generational wealth, really the big pillars outside of understanding personal finance and getting your own financial life in order, there are specific tools that you can use to build financial wealth for generations below you. So this first one I'm going to talk about is the 529 savings plan. And this is a plan that's specifically for education. So it is an investment tool. And the thing that's great about this investment tool is one, it goes to education, but then two, growth in that account that is tax-free grows at a tax-free rate. So essentially, if you get investment returns from that, that grows without taxes, and you also can withdraw the amount tax-free. While other kind of investment tools, you will get taxed for every sort of transaction. But this one is great. It goes in post-tax money, so you'll already be taxed the money that actually goes into this account, but it grows tax-free, and also you can take money out tax-free. Another thing that's amazing about this plan is that one, so a lot of times people say it's only for children, but it's not only for children, because if you're an adult and you want to go back to school, or say you're in high school and you maybe think, hey, maybe I want to go to school later in life, you can start one for yourself as well. You can also start one and then transfer to somebody else's name. So if I were to start one right now under my name, I have one child, but if I want to start one, I could technically start one for another child right now before they're even born, or I could start one for a cousin even. And so you start the account and then you can transfer it over tax-free as well, and fee-free. So you wouldn't pay any types of fees to someone else if you're not going to use that for yourself. Who can open a 529? Essentially, anyone can open a 529 as long as they know someone's social security number and they have a relationship with that child. For majority of people, it's mostly parents, grandparents, godparents, aunts and uncles, so close relationship with children. And the reason why this is really awesome is because when you're looking at investing and you're thinking, okay, so if you start young, so if you start a 529 plan, we started our child's 529 plan when she was born, but if you even start when you're 5 and you're looking at the cost of college, you're thinking college, depending on the school that may go to, I do easy flat rate of like $25,000 a year, which would cost about $100,000 over the 4-year term. You could have potentially saved that amount before they even reach 18, right? So if you're regularly putting money into a savings account, if you can tell people, hey, and for me personally, when people ask, what do I get your child for your birthday, for Christmas? I say, we appreciate any and all gifts, but it would be great if you could invest into their 529. That's because they're investing into my child's future. And if you have any of children always accumulate things pretty much anyway, in any capacity, right? They get toys. But investing into their future is a great, great gift. And I think it's one of the ways that the wealthy also build wealth, is because they essentially will start these accounts, pass them on, and then if you have a remainder of those accounts, so say you don't use all the money, you can pass that on. It's just essentially a continuous way of having tax incentives, and then also building for the next generation. One of the questions that's always asked to me, though, is what happens if your child chooses not to go to college? Now, I can say, yes, college isn't for everyone, but historically and typically things are changing. The more education, it leads into higher income. However, the 529 has changed dramatically. So one, now it's not only for college, you can use a certain portion for a private school. You can also use a certain portion for some vocational school. So there are technical trainings that you can apply the 529 to as well. And it's not only just for tuition, you can use it for books, you can use it for school trips, depending on the relationship of the school. But there's now a lot of different ways you can use a 529. And then they just put into law that you will be able to transfer up to $35,000 within of a lifetime from a 529 if it's not used. Because what was happening was some people were saying, oh, I'm saving too much money into the 529 and I have all this money and I don't have anyone to pass it down to. You can also transfer up to $35,000 to a Roth IRA account, which is a retirement account individually. And so the 529 is a great plan to pass down generational wealth because it teaches investing, but then also it's essentially an investment tool for your child specifically. Rather than saving to education, you can invest to education. Any questions about a 529? Okay.
And also, if there's any questions on anything we've mentioned up to this point, because I know that Ainjel and I previously, we just shared a lot about what we're personally doing to go about building generational wealth. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we will answer them.
Yes, definitely. Oh, also I want to say, going back to the 529, what's great about this is that each state offers their own 529 plan. So as most of you or all of you are from Washington, Washington state does not have like tax deductions for contributing into 529. Other states do, but for me, I live in Texas. This is real life right now. I live in Texas, but I do not invest into Texas 529. I invest into Utah's 529 solely because they have some of the lowest fees in the country. So that essentially means more of my money is going to investing than if it were in Texas's 529 plan. And I can do that. I don't have to pay any type of penalties. I don't pay any fees to Utah except the management fee that they have, but that's lower than Texas. So there's a little bit more freedom and choice with the 529 too. Aaron asked, can the 529 be used for the child prior to 18 if started in early childhood birth? Yes, Aaron. So are you asking if it can be used for like private school, or if it can use like if they go to college before 17? Yes. So for private school, you also can use a 529 for private school. There's up to a certain amount. I don't believe it's capped at a certain amount or capped at a certain percentage, but yes, you can use a 529 towards private school. They did change that. Okay, so we're going to get into building generational wealth with real estate investing. And so to be completely transparent, I am not a real estate expert. I am more of just personal finance, financial literacy expert. Real estate, though I am a homeowner and I also am a real estate investor, I have, I would say, not limited, but a little bit more knowledge. But there are plenty of people who know a lot of more things about real estate investing than myself. But I will share about how you can build generational wealth with real estate investing. So the amazing thing about real estate investing is because one, it gives you an asset that you can pass down, but then also there are several ways that it's building generational wealth with that one asset. So in the first bullet, you can see it can be an appreciating asset. And then it can also possibly be income generating. So what that means is that it's appreciating where the value of it today most likely will not be the value of it in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? It's going to grow in value. So that would mean that if you were to sell it in that time, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you would get essentially more money than you paid for it. And that is even if you include inflation. So that's the really first great thing about appreciating about real estate, is because it is appreciating asset in that case. And also can be an income generating asset, which means you can receive cash flow from it. Now, when I say real estate, I don't only mean a house as well, because if you buy land, you can also you can buy parking lots, and that's land. Or you can buy land where people have businesses, right? And so it's not a house, but people will pay you rent to be on that land. That is also something. So it is one thing where you can get cash flow from the real estate. It is easily transferable. While it is not it's not a liquid asset, and liquid meaning like cash investment, something that you can get as for cash very quickly. It can be transferred very easily and can pass down through generations. There are also tax incentives to owning real estate and being a real estate investor, and then also transferring real estate as an asset rather than transferring cash as an asset. There are tax benefits to that as well. And then there are available programs and financial assistance for low to mid income families, but then also other families as well. First time home buyers, the VA loan. NACA is a program. I don't remember what it stands for, but NACA is a home buying program that I personally know two families close to me have used, and they themselves have mid to high income. So it's not only limited if you have a certain income, but the point of NACA is to help people, buy a home. And so they work with you directly to do that. And they do help with down payment assistance as well. And then Black Home Initiative, which we may have a little more knowledge about as well. But these are programs that you can use while also looking for a home and also while looking to invest in real estate.
And to add here, so for real estate specifically, on my personal journey, I last year went to Texas, where Ainjel actually is, not to visit her, but to look at real estate in Dallas and Austin. And then I later on went to Atlanta to also look at real estate. And one thing that I learned, just because, and the reason that I was looking outside of Washington is just that prices, as many of you have likely seen, were starting to get a little out of control. And that combined with interest, like the comment, Chris, that combined with interest rates, just didn't really force me, but encouraged me to look elsewhere. And one of the most interesting things that I found is I was looking specifically at new construction communities. And so I think when people think of buying a home, a lot of times you're thinking about a home that somebody else owns that they are now selling. And another option are new build communities, where there are these communities where they're basically standing up a bunch of homes, and you've likely driven by some where the houses will like look the same or look very similar, and there's usually kind of like a few different models that they'll use. But one of the incentives that they had was, it was kind of this like adjustable rate for the interest on the loan, but in a good way, where let's say that the interest rate right now for homes is, let's say it's 6%. The program that I was being offered is one that would start around like 4.9% for the first year. And then the second year, it would be like 5.5 or something like that. And then the last year, it would be closer to whatever the average interest rate is for home loans, which was a way of kind of like starting off with home ownership at an interest rate that was lower. So the mortgage payments were going to be lower, and then they would increase and then they would stop. So it wouldn't be adjustable forever and ever and ever. But another consideration, I think Ainjel just mentioned it, is property taxes. So property taxes in Texas are extraordinary. Is I guess a word that I would use. In Washington, they're not as high. So that is one thing that we all have on our side for those of us in Washington. But
we just passed a bill to lower our property taxes, though.
Oh, congrats.
Multi-billion-dollar, thank you. A multi-billion-dollar bill to lower our taxes. So hopefully, right, it'll be a little better for us. Yeah.
And so for those of you who are thinking about purchasing a home, whether it's within the next couple of years or within months, an important consideration on the amount of money that you're going to be paying monthly will be property taxes. So making sure that you factor that into the cost of home ownership, because it's not something I wasn't aware of it until I went to Texas. And there, at the time that I went last year, the amount of property taxes that I was going to be paying would make up for, it was about like 1/3 of my monthly payment, which for me made something that was previously affordable no longer affordable. So making sure to factor that into your home buying decision is important. With renting, you obviously don't have to pay property taxes.
Yeah. That's the one thing. But also when you're looking at like real estate, one of the things that people always say, right, we're not creating more land, right? And so that's why real estate investing is very valuable. But I'm sure Obi's going to talk about it in his later session. But if you don't essentially want to like own land as a landowner or a landlord, there are ways to invest in real estate as well. And they're called REITs, REIT. Was it real estate investing? I'm not sure what the T stands for.
Trust.
Trust, thank you. And so essentially it works like the stock market where you purchase, it really is like the Costco of real estate, right? So it will be like a trust will purchase a certain, so they have like investment in one thing that's really easy to use, like cell phone towers. So they own the land of like cell phone towers. And so you can essentially invest into cell phone tower land. And you though will be real estate investing in that capacity, right? Because you're not investing into a business, you're legit buying land. And there are really, really great benefits to that as well, because they essentially have to give back dividends minimum by law. So there's no like option of giving a kickback to their investors. They by law have to give back money to their investors. And it's very, very transparent how REITs work. And so that's another great way to do real estate investing. If you don't want to purchase land in that capacity, you can also be a REIT owner. And I myself also invest in REITs. So I diversify by being a real estate investor through REITs. And I do that with my brokerage account. And let me type in REITs here. Okay. So moving on, this one is huge, life insurance. So this is a really, really important way of thinking. If you need life insurance and how you're going to pass down life insurance policies through generational wealth. So first question is like, who should get life insurance? So a lot of times people think, oh, the only time you need life insurance is if you're just a new parent. But I would argue that if anyone depends on you financially in any capacity for their livelihood, you should have life insurance. That meaning if you are taking care of someone, whether it be a sibling or an aunt, your parents, and if they are like relatively young, but if you are their source of income, then you should also have life insurance. But I believe everyone, especially parents or every parent, by minimum should have life insurance because your children are dependent on you. One of the things about life insurance is the younger that you do buy a policy, the cheaper it is. Typically because when you get older, you get closer to dying or passing. And so they increase the rates because that increases their chance of paying out a life insurance policy, right? So the healthier you are, the younger you are, that's really the time to get life insurance. Terms, and so there are two types of life insurance. There's term life insurance versus permanent life, which most people know as whole life insurance. So I'll say it's whole life insurance. And so term life insurance, it's temporary and it typically lasts 10 to 30 years. Those kind of terms, you can get a 10-year term, 20-year term, 30-year term. Sometimes you can get like 5-year terms or like 50-year terms, but those will have like special circumstances and they'll vary with the cost. They are more affordable premiums, which means monthly, they're going to be much more affordable. So me personally right now, I pay $45 a month for my life insurance. Before I had another policy that I actually canceled, and that was $35 a month. And I'll get into the reason why I canceled that one to actually pay $45 a month instead. With term life also, there's no cash value growth opportunity. So that means that it literally is just, it's like car insurance, right? It's just the only way I'm going to be able to access that is if I pass. There's no value for that. I can't take out money on top of that. It just goes in there, and if I pass before my term is up, then my beneficiaries will get my policy. But if not, if I live and exceed the life of my policy, then it just goes away. Whole life insurance, it is guaranteed lifetime protection. So it lasts your entire life. So it doesn't matter what age, when you pass. And however, it is significantly more expensive than term life insurance. So while my term life insurance is $45 a month, if I were to get a whole life insurance policy, that may be like $500 a month. And that's pretty typical. I've actually seen whole life insurance policies be like $1,000 a month. But from ones that when I did do research, it was about 500 that I saw that I considered, but after looking at it, I decided not to get that. But with the whole life insurance, you can access some of the cash flow. So essentially kind of works like a bank account, and you can borrow it against it. Any questions first in life insurance? Okay, so with life insurance though, right, it is one of those things where sometimes some companies offer it through their benefits package. And so what that will be at times is they may offer like a year or 2 years of your salary to be paid out upon your death. But for jobs that don't, life insurance is insurance that you have to search for yourself, like any other type, like car insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance. These are ones that you have to go actively look for. A lot of times companies will try to sell you on whole life insurance, really pushing that you can borrow against it or that it has a cash value. However, for most people, if you have life insurance, it really is, I don't want to say better, but it's more beneficial to people to have term life insurance and then also invest on the side, right? So what the thing about life insurance is people will say like, it is a way to build generational wealth, but it only really works if you have a whole life policy or if you pass before your term life is up. But the reason why that is important is because, right, no one knows what's going to happen, and we all want to live long, prosperous, healthy lives. But we also have to consider if someone relies on me, I need to make sure that they are okay, right? And with that, you don't want to pass on debts to anyone. And Obi and I, like we talked about this a lot, is that, when people pass on, what happens is sometimes like they pass on debts. With life insurance, if you have debts and your term is still live, that life insurance will cover those debts that you were passing on and then get additional onto that, right? So that's just one way that you're covering the next generation, is through life insurance. And so I implore you, especially if you have children, but also if anyone depends on you, look for life insurance, where while you especially are younger rather than older. And especially if you are healthier. And I will say this, and this actually is something close to me that was really, really hard to deal with. But I remember talking to my friend. She didn't have life insurance at the time, and she had just had a baby. And I was like, hey, you really should get life insurance. At the time, I was like, we can look for policies for you that are like $30 a month. And, she was saying, well, at the time, it just really wasn't feasible for her. And I understood, but I was like, I'll work with you to budget so that we can get you to getting that policy. And this is one of those really situations that you never would think happened. My friend actually, they found she had stage 3 breast cancer. And so she is in a position now where getting life insurance isn't really optional for her because they do a health check. And if she had locked in that life insurance before, when she didn't have stage 3, we don't even know if she had breast cancer at that time. Maybe there were indicators, but if she had done that policy before or like kept an early policy, even with having breast cancer, her policy wouldn't change. and she would at least have that locked in so that if anything were to happen, right, she would be able to pass that down. But now she can't even get a life insurance policy that would be able to take care of her child, let's say if, if anything were to happen now. And so that's really what you want to consider, is it's insurance for a reason. So I definitely implore you to look for policies and do some research. Policy Genius is a website that I used to get my policy, and I found that they worked with you to see what was within your budget and what you were looking to actually pay for. Yeah. And then Obi, anything to add to that?
Nothing from me, not related to life insurance. There is a question from Chris, at least related to brokerage accounts, which I've been trying to address in the chat. But at its core, just think of a brokerage account, and I don't want to take away from the life insurance discussion. A brokerage account is a bank account that gives you access to the stock market. So I think when you create a brokerage account, you would have to fund it with money. So you'd have to transfer money into it. And then you'll have the ability to buy and sell shares of different securities, such as Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, and other companies, and then also purchase mutual funds, ETFs, which Ainjel and I have kind of like briefly gone over before as well.
Okay, and then we can move on then to wills. Thanks, Obi. Okay, and next. Okay, so everyone should have a will. That is a statement I stand behind, because you are a person that has something and may not even know what you have, but if you have any type of assets, you should have a will. The first reason why I believe everyone should have a will is because if you don't have a will, you are giving the state, and by state, I mean the government, permission to decide to do with your assets as they see fit. In most cases, it goes to your direct descendants or your direct next of kin. That's in most cases, but those are like clean cut cases. Reason why everyone should have a will, there are people who pass, like Aretha Franklin, who did not have a will. Just as recently as Takeoff did not have a will, right? And really, unfortunately, his family, they were battling his assets. And so when you think, right, you're thinking like, okay, only like wealthy people have a will, because that's what I thought. I was like, oh, I'll just go to my husband or just go to my child, not realizing that there's still like a process that the government still goes through, because unless I have every single account that I have a beneficiary identified for that account. They go through a probate process, and that probate process literally can take about 3 to 6% percentage of your assets, because they have to pay for that probate. And probate means that they go through your assets, they look at, okay, who should get this and who should get that. And someone has to do that job. And so they pay that person with your assets. And so if you don't have a will, you're essentially letting the government say, okay, what are we going to do when you pass? And so everyone should have a will. Now, there are some misconceptions about wills, that it's expensive. And so just like anything else, things either take time or take money, or take effort, right, to do. And so the thing about why people say it's really expensive is because they'll think I have to hire a lawyer to get a will and I have to hold it somewhere. While yes, having a lawyer will make it easier for you to complete a will, it's not necessary. Really what you need with a will is you need 2 like signers or witnesses. You need to get it notarized, and then you need someone who's going to be an executor. So those witnesses they can't benefit from your will. So I can't have my husband be a witness to my will. And your executor, which is the person who is going to make sure that your will is followed through as you wanted it, they also cannot benefit they may be able to benefit from your will, but let's just go clean cut. They're not supposed to, but I think that they can. But the signers absolutely cannot benefit from your will. And so if you have a notary, someone who's notarized, sometimes banks have free notaries. Sometimes you can hire a notary at a low cost. Some programs sometimes will have notaries available, but a lot of times if you have a relationship with a bank, you can call them and ask them if they have a notary and see if they'll let you notarize something. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It just depends on how you want to actually use it or how you actually want to get one. Time consuming. Well, the thing is, I think that a will is pretty important because it lists out the assets that you have. And so it's one thing that you want to take some time on, but it doesn't take months to do. It's just something that you fill out specific paperwork. They ask you questions. You can literally type in Google right now, will template, and they will have wills that you can fill out yourself and go through, and then you can bring to a notary to do that yourself, or you can do it online. Well, they'll have they'll maybe give you assistance while you're doing that online. Making one is complicated. Like I said, with the template, they try to make it as simple as possible, so it won't be complicated. But if you do think it may be complicated, just even understanding it, then I would suggest maybe going to a lawyer and finding someone, if you can, through your company, see if they have some sort of legal assistance available. But if not, look in community programs. They'll have maybe legal assistance available to help with getting over that complication. It's absolutely not for those with extreme wealth. Will is, I believe, for any living person that owns anything. A car, if you have a car, it's a paid off car, have a will. If you have a house, have a will. If you have things in your home, you should have a will. If you have money in your bank account, you should have a will. If you have anything, everyone should have a will. It's only for new parents, the elderly, or sick. That absolutely is not true as well. If you think you're going to give your things to anyone else, that then absolutely should have a will. And then once you create one, it's the only one you can have. That definitely is not true. You can amend your will, and it can supersede a current will that you have as well. And you just go through the process again, making sure it's timed and notarized. And then the most latest one will be the one that will be the effective one upon your death.
Yep. And as Ainjel has mentioned, I think it's important to consider that you're never too old or too young to start to think about a will. It's a way of just making sure that when you're gone, you've decided what happens to what you own instead of the state. So whether it's jewelry that you have, a car that you have, a tennis ball, or it's or it's larger and it's investments that you have or assets that you have that you want to go specifically to a child, a stepchild, a cousin, or whoever it may be. A will is one way to help ensure that happens when you're no longer around.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really the thing, right? So if we're all here to build generational wealth, you want to make sure that you're actually passing it down, right? You don't want it to get locked up. If maybe, if you have a family situation where it's not clean cut who it should go to, you want to make sure it's going to the people that it's supposed to go to. You also want to make sure that it's not wrapped up legally. The government's taking time to do that, because that's not going to essentially do with what you want it to do, right? You're building generational wealth for the people like your family, or if you're passing on to like a nonprofit, right? Just like you want to do with your money while you're living, you want to know essentially what you're doing with your money right after you pass too. Well, you can't know that, but you want to set it up that it goes where you want it to go.
And then you have a question from Mitra, I believe. Mm-hmm. Ainjel.
Yeah, so essentially to make a will, you need to have witnesses, because what will happen is when they are going through your will, like an executor, they can say, yes, this was witnessed by someone, right? And so they won't have to essentially call those witnesses. But when the witnesses are with the notary, then it kind of bypasses having to call them, because then you always will need witnesses, because if they're not there when it's notarized, the judge, because there still is always like a judge, there's still some sort of process, will then have to say, hey, did Ainjel say this and this, right? They just want to make sure that one, you weren't under duress when you were writing this will, and then also that you were the person who was writing this will. If the bank does not do a free notary, do you still need witnesses? So if the bank doesn't do a free notary, but they do a paid notary, or are you saying like, so you may not need, you can still get it notarized without witnesses and you can have them sign, but you still will need witnesses to your will. But it's better to have them there notarized so that they won't have to be called upon again after you pass. So essentially they can just take that document and say, this was notarized and so was there when it was notarized, they are the witnesses, rather than, hey, this is notarized, caveat, these are the witnesses, let's go call them to see if this is actually true. And
Perfect.
Lenora has a question. Let's see if I can unmute. Hey, Lenora. Can you hear us? We can't hear you if you're on mute.
And the hand is gone. So in the interest of time, we're gonna quickly go over some final things and then try to answer any outstanding questions. So at the beginning of this presentation, we asked you to think about what passing down generational wealth looks like to you. Hopefully at this time, you have maybe a better sense or more defined sense of what that looks like to you and how you'd like to build generational wealth looking forward. One thing also to consider is to know your net worth. And we didn't go into detail about it earlier, but your net worth is one measure of your financial health, which is taken by subtracting your liabilities, which is everything that you owe, from your assets. And assets will be things like cars that you own that you're no longer making payments on, or more specifically, like cash savings or investments. And then liabilities will be debt. So outstanding credit card debt, or student loans, mortgage loans, car loans, and things like that. There are different tools that you can use to calculate your net worth. So at the end, we have some links, and this deck will be shared out. But NerdWallet is a website that has a net worth calculator that you can go and use. Alternatively, I use an app called Mint for my budgeting, and that aggregates all of my accounts, including student loans, my car loan when I had one, and then all my assets as well. And then it presents me with a net worth that I can look at to see, okay, my net worth went up or it went down. And then again, to think about when it comes to empowering future generation, understanding that when it comes to passing down generational wealth, it's not just passing down money, but it's also passing down knowledge and making sure that you're equipping your family and your children with the knowledge and access to knowledge so that they know what it means to budget, they know what it means to save money, and they have healthy money habits so that when you pass down anything to them, they know how to manage it. So following this session, some things that you can do to help you on your journey to building generational wealth will be to list out your assets and liabilities. So thinking about your bank accounts, so money that you have, investments that you have, if any, and then also your liabilities to get a picture, a holistic picture of what you have and what you owe. And then also to create SMART goals. So thinking about specific goals that are time-bound and measurable. And then calculating your discretionary income. Your discretionary income is the amount of money that you have left over after you've paid for bills and necessities. So basically you would take your paycheck and then subtract from it any bills that you have, such as a mortgage or rent, your light bill, and things like that. And what's remaining after you've paid for all your bills is your discretionary income. And that is the amount of money that you'll be budgeting and be able to save, invest, or use to pay off any loans. And then again, to think of ways to increase income and reduce expenses, evaluate if life insurance is right for you. We have a link that'll be provided with this deck on a resource for that. And then I mentioned previously to review your financial accounts to get an idea of your financial picture. And that is extremely important because once you have a strong idea of where you are, you're then able to start to create those realistic goals and then be able to track your progress towards them over time. And then here are some resources for all of you. So you've got Ainjel's website, Rare Bird Money. And then there's a net worth calculator on NerdWallet that'll be provided. Investopedia, if none of you have heard of Investopedia, highly recommend checking them out. If you're ever curious as to anything related to investing, whether it's what is a stock or what is a mutual fund, I would go to Google and type in what is a stock, and then follow it up with saying Investopedia. Or if you're curious as to, I know there's a question on what are ETFs, I would type in what is an ETF and then Investopedia. And that is how I came to get a lot of the knowledge that I have today about investing, is by going specifically to that website, because they break down literally everything that you can possibly know when it comes to investing. So I recommend that 1,000%.
I agree. Investopedia is the Google of investing. And then what's pretty awesome about that is they're like a non like personal Google, right? So essentially they're like a Wikipedia, which is Investopedia. That makes sense. So it's not like personal people anecdotes, but it really is like they're going to give you the real tested and researched answer to the question that you have. So I definitely second that. I use that just as much when I was starting to learn. They were pretty much my source of truth.
So if any of you are looking to connect with Ainjel or I, you are more than welcome to reach out via email. And so those are provided here, or again, to follow us on socials, whether that's Instagram or any other platform. And you find me at College Money Habits and Ainjel at Rare Bird Money. And then our websites as well is another medium at which you could connect with us or to access articles and different information. And then forgot to put it up, but Bird Bar Place is another website, of course, where you can go to access information, view videos, and to also take quizzes as it relates to budgeting, saving, and credit.